to the Keeling Cocos Islands was now only 550 miles. But even in this short run, it was necessary to be extremely careful in keeping a true course, else I would miss the atoll. On the 12th, some 100 miles southwest of Christmas Island, I saw anti-trade clouds flying up from the southwest very high over the regular winds, which weakened now for a few days, while a swell heavier than usual set in also from the southwest. A winter gale was going on in the direction of the Cape of Good Hope. Accordingly, I steered higher to windward, allowing 20 miles a day while this went on for change of current. And it was not too much, for on that course I made the Keeling Islands right ahead. The first unmistakable sign of the land was a visit one morning from a white tern that fluttered very knowingly about the vessel, and then took itself off westward with a businesslike air in its wing. The tern is called by the islanders the pilot of Keeling Cocos. Farther on, I came among a great number of birds fishing and fighting over whatever they caught. My reckoning was up, and springing aloft, I saw from halfway up the mast coconut trees standing out of the water ahead. I expected to see this, still it thrilled me as an electric shock might have done. I slid down the mast, trembling under the strangest sensations, and not able to resist the impulse, I sat on deck and gave way to my emotions. To folks in a parlour on shore, this may seem weak indeed, but I am telling the story of a voyage alone. I didn't touch the helm, for with the current and heave of the sea, the sloop found herself at the end of the run, absolutely in the fairway of the channel. You couldn't have beaten it in the navy. Then I trimmed her sails by the wind, took the helm, and flogged her up the couple of miles or so abreast the harbour landing, where I cast anchor at 3:30 p.m., July 17, 1897, 23 days from Thursday Island. The distant run was 2,700 miles as the crow flies. This would have been a fair Atlantic voyage. It was a delightful sail. During those 23 days, I had not spent altogether more than 3 hours at the helm, including the time occupied in beating into Keeling harbour. I just lashed the helm and let her go. Whether the wind was abeam or dead aft, it was all the same. She always sailed on her course. No part of the voyage up to this point, taking it by and large, had been so finished as this. The Keeling Cocos Islands, according to Admiral Fitzroy, R.N., lie between the latitudes of 11 degrees 50 minutes and 12 degrees 12 minutes south, and the longitudes of 96 degrees 51 minutes and 96 degrees 58 minutes east. They were discovered in 1608-9 by Captain William Keeling, then in the service of the East India Company. The southern group consists of 7 or 8 islands and islets on the atoll, which is the skeleton of what some day, according to the history of coral reefs, will be a continuous island. North Keeling has no harbour, is seldom visited, and is of no importance. The South Keelings are a strange little world, with a romantic history all their own. They have been visited occasionally by the floating spar of some hurricane-swept ship, or by a tree that has drifted all the way from Australia, or by an ill-starred ship cast away, and finally by man. Even a rock once drifted to Keeling, held fast among the roots of a tree. After the discovery of the islands by Captain Keeling, their first notable visitor was Captain John Clunis-Ross, who in 1814 touched in the ship Borneo on a voyage to India. Captain Ross returned 2 years later with his wife and family and his mother-in-law Mrs. Dimmock and 8 sailor artisans to take possession of the islands, but found there already one Alexander Hare, who meanwhile had marked the little atoll as a sort of Eden for a seraglio of Malay women, which he moved over from the coast of Africa. It was Ross's own brother, oddly enough, who freighted Hare and his crowd of women to the islands, not knowing of Captain John's plans to occupy the little world. And so Hare was there with his outfit as if he had come to stay. On his previous visit, however, Ross had nailed the English Jack to a mast on Horsberg Island, one of the group. After 2 years, shreds of it still fluttered in the wind, and his sailors, nothing loath, began at once the invasion of the new kingdom, to take possession of it, women and all. The force of 40 women, with only 1 man to command them, was not equal to driving 8 sturdy sailors back into the sea. From this time on, Hare had a hard time of it. He and Ross did not get on well as neighbours. The islands were too small and too near for characters so widely different. Hare had oceans of money, and might have lived well in London, but he had been governor of a wild colony in Borneo, and could not confine himself to the tame life that prosy civilization affords. And so he hung on to the atoll with his 40 women, retreating little by little before Ross and his sturdy crew, till at last he found himself and his harem on the little island known to this day as Prison Island, where, like Bluebeard, he confined his wives in a castle. The channel between the islands was narrow, the water was not deep, and the 8 Scotch sailors wore long boots. Hare was now dismayed. He tried to compromise with rum and other luxuries, but these things only made matters worse. On the day following the first St. Andrew's celebration on the island, Hare, consumed with rage, and no longer on speaking terms with the captain, dashed off a note to him saying, "Dear Ross, I thought when I sent rum and roast pig to your sailors that they would stay away from my flower garden." In reply to which, the captain, burning with indignation, shouted from the centre of the island where he stood, "Ahoy there on Prison Island! You, Hare, don't you know that rum and roast pig are not a sailor's heaven?" Hare said afterward that one might have heard the captain's roar across to Java. The lawless establishment was soon broken up by the women deserting Prison Island and putting themselves under Ross's protection. Hare then went to Batavia, where he met his death. My first impression upon landing was that the crime of infanticide had not reached the islands of Keeling Cocos. "The children have all come to welcome you," explained Mr. Ross, as they mustered at the jetty by hundreds, of all ages and sizes. The people of this country were all rather shy, but young or old, they never passed one, or saw one passing their door, without a salutation. In their musical voices they would say, "Are you walking? Jalan, Jalan." "Will you come along?" one would answer. For a long time after I arrived, the children regarded the one-man ship with suspicion and fear. A native man had been blown away to sea many years before, and they hinted to one another that he might have changed from black to white and returned in the sloop. For some time every movement I made was closely watched. They were particularly interested in what I ate. One day, after I had been boot-topping the sloop with a composition of coal tar and other stuff, and while I was taking my dinner with the luxury of blackberry jam, I heard a commotion and then a yell and a stampede as the children ran away yelling, "The captain is eating coal tar! The captain is eating coal tar!" But they soon found out that this same coal tar was very good to eat, and that I had brought a quantity of it. One day, when I was spreading a sea biscuit thick with it for a wide-awake youngster, I heard them whisper, "Chut, chut," meaning that a shark had bitten my hand, which they observed was lame. Thenceforth, they regarded me as a hero, and I had not fingers enough for the little bright-eyed tots that wanted to cling to them and follow me about. Before this, when I held out my hand and said, "Come," they would shy off for the nearest house and say, "Dinjin, it's cold," or "Ujan, it's going to rain." But it was now accepted that I was not the returned spirit of the lost man, and I had plenty of friends about the island, rain or shine. One day after this, when I tried to haul the sloop and found her fast in the sand, the children all clapped their hands and cried that a petting, or a crab, was holding her by the keel. And little Ophelia, 10 or 12 years of age, wrote in the Spray's logbook, "100 men with might and main on the windlass hove, yo-ho. The cable only came in twain, the ship she would not go. For child to tell the strangest thing, the keel was held by a great petting." This being so or not, it was decided that the Mohammedan priest, Sama the Emim, for a pot of jam, should ask Mohammed to bless the voyage and make the crab let go the sloop's keel, which it did, if it had hold, and she floated on the very next tide. On the 22nd of July arrived HMS Iphigenia, with Mr. Justice Andrew J. Leach and court officers on board, on a circuit of inspection among the Straits settlements, of which Keeling Cocos was a dependency, to hear complaints and try cases by law, if any there were to try. They found the Spray hauled ashore and tied to a coconut tree. But at the Keeling Islands there had not been a grievance to complain of since the day that Hare migrated, for the Rosses have always treated the islanders as their own family. If there is a paradise on this earth, it is Keeling. There was not a case for a lawyer, but something had to be done, for here were 2 ships in port, a great man of war and the Spray. Instead of a lawsuit, a dance was got up, and all the officers who could leave their ship came ashore. Everybody on the island came, old and young, and the governor's great hall was filled with people. All that could get on their feet danced, while the babies lay in heaps in the corners of the room, content to look on. My little friend Ophelia danced with the judge. For music, 2 fiddles screeched over and over again the good old tune, "We won't go home till morning," and we did not. The women at the Keelings do not do all the drudgery, as in many places visited on the voyage. It would cheer the heart of a Fuegian woman to see the Keeling Lord of Creation up a coconut tree. Besides cleverly climbing the trees, the men of Keeling build exquisitely modelled canoes. By far the best workmanship in boat building I saw on the voyage was here. Many finished mechanics dwelt under the palms at Keeling, and the hum of the bandsaw and the ring of the anvil were heard from morning till night. The first Scotch settlers left there the strength of northern blood and the inheritance of steady habits. No benevolent society has ever done so much for any islanders as the noble Captain Ross and his sons, who have followed his example of industry and thrift. Admiral Fitzroy of the Beagle, who visited here where many things are reversed, spoke of these singular though small islands, where crabs eat coconuts, fish eat coral, dogs catch fish, men ride on turtles, and shells are dangerous man-traps, adding that the greater part of the seafowl roost on branches, and many rats make their nests in the tops of palm trees. My vessel being refitted, I decided to load her with the famous mammoth Tridacna shell of Keeling, found in the bayou nearby. And right here, within sight of the village, I came near losing the crew of the Spray. Not from putting my foot in a man-trap shell, however, but from carelessly neglecting to look after the details of a trip across the harbour in a boat. I had sailed over oceans. I have since completed a course over them all, and sailed round the whole world without so nearly meeting a fatality as on that trip across a lagoon, where I trusted all to someone else, and he, weak mortal that he was, perhaps trusted all to me. However that may be, I found myself with a thoughtless African negro in a rickety bateau that was fitted with a rotten sail, and this blew away in mid-channel in a squall that sent us drifting helplessly to sea, where we should have been incontinently lost. With the whole ocean before us to leeward, I was dismayed to see, while we drifted, that there was not a paddle or an oar in the boat. There was an anchor, to be sure, but not enough rope to tie a cat, and we were already in deep water. By great good fortune, however, there was a pole. Plying this as a paddle with the utmost energy, and by the merest accidental flaw in the wind to favour us, the trap of a boat was worked into shoal water, where we could touch bottom and push her ashore. With Africa the nearest coast to leeward, 3,000 miles away, with not so much as a drop of water in the boat, and a lean and hungry negro, well, cast the lot as one might, the crew of the Spray in a little while would have been hard to find. It is needless to say that I took no more such chances. The Tridacna were afterwards procured in a safe boat, 30 of them taking the place of 3 tons of cement ballast, which I threw overboard to make room and give buoyancy.